This is not a debate, but if you would like to respond to something that another opponent has said, please feel free to. Just keep it respectful. I think that's our only ground rule. We may have more questions for certain people than other people. That's just how it goes. We know more about some people than we do about other people. All right, are we rolling? Great, okay. So we're gonna start by having each of you just introduce yourselves for about 2 minutes. Please try to keep it to 2 minutes. Where you grew up, what your professional experiences is, so work experiences, civic involvement, whether you served on government advisory committees, boards of anything, and then if you've run for office before, and if so, what that office has been, and also, if you can fit it in, why you're running for office. So we'll just go down the line. Jesse, would you like to start?
2 minutes.
My name is Jessie Burke. I'm originally from Washington, D.C. I am the granddaughter of a Chinese immigrant, and my family grew up very poor after my father was paralyzed before the Americans with Disabilities Act. My first profession was fencing, actually, because my parents told us we all had to become good at something if we wanted to get out of poverty. So I left home when I was 12 and paid my way with being a member of the United States National Fencing Team. I studied teaching and moved to Portland, taught an after-school program at Roosevelt High School, and then was the education coordinator at the Native American Youth and Family Center, helping young Native students either finish high school or get into college. And then I went back to get my master's in public administration from Portland State University and focused on strategic planning. Because I just observed how much red tape there was and was hoping that maybe the solution was policy. Ultimately, I went into private sector because I felt that it was likely I could be more helpful just because I chose to, rather than working in the nonprofit or government sector. So my first business was Posey's Bakery and Cafe in Kenton, and then my husband and I opened the Society Hotel. Civically, I restarted the Kenton Business Association, and we were very active starting things like the Kenton Street Fair, where we would have 10,000 visitors for our events. I lead the Old Town Community Association, which is a joint neighborhood and business association. I reference this because I think they're like baby governments for neighborhoods. And that I sat on the governor's task force this last year as one of 2 small business owners on the task force. And I'm running because I am in the thick of it all day, every day. I'm feeling like I'm struggling a little today with what I saw just before I came here, which is just sort of my daily experience. Knowing that, a young woman is being trafficked and she's being passed around the apartment building across the street, and the rest of the day she just dances wildly, taking drugs to suppress those feelings. So I'm seeing and living through what I think most citizens are witnessing every single day. I don't have the luxury of making decisions from an office moving chess pieces. I'm in the middle. And I would like to provide some more tangible solutions based on what I see on the ground.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, hi everyone. Nick Hara. Let's see here, where do I start? I have a lot of trouble answering the where are you from question. In the last 25 years of my life, I've lived in a different place every 5 years. It's been a lot of fun getting to see different parts of the country. But my family's from here. I'm a 4th generation Japanese American Portlander here. I live just a couple blocks away from where my great grandparents are buried. And basically, this is the only place in the world that I can really call home that I've known my entire life. And so, in the middle of the pandemic, we were in New York in a little tiny 1-bedroom. And my wife and I said, where do we want to be? We at the time, we couldn't get to the West Coast, but Portland was the destination. It was the place we really wanted to go. So when we had the opportunity and we said, we're ready to start a family, the first thing we did was we figured out how to pack up all of our stuff, fly our cat across the country, take a 5-day road trip, 6-day road trip, across the country in the middle of winter, and now I've got a 14-month-old, almost 15-month-old, and I'm living in Portland, and it's kind of funny. It's been kind of a lifelong dream to actually be here, be with family, and to have that support system. I mean, just right now, my aunt is helping out with childcare because, of course, I didn't refigure out the childcare situation for my wife when I'm normally in this chunk right now.
What do you do for work?
Currently I am a consultant, a data consultant. I've been doing that for the last, let's see here, 12 years or so.
Do you, who's your employer?
So it's myself right now. Before this, I was employed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on her campaign. I did that for 4 years.
What did you do on her campaign?
Yeah, so I was the data director, which is not something that a lot of people understand what that is. It's a kind of a rare role. Most data directors really just pull lists of voters to go reach out to. What we had as a well-resourced campaign was the ability to do more. So during the pandemic, we did direct food aid. We were helping with census outreach for historically undercounted populations, and I was helping identify those populations so that we could actually help people count. If you paid attention to what happened in New York, they missed keeping their representatives, all of their representatives, by 89 people. We helped people fill out thousands of censuses, and that is one of the reasons that we didn't lose 2 representatives in New York. We've done a lot of other interesting stuff, like after the recent and extensive flooding that happened in New York, we actually have a map that we've put up where we can identify which buildings in New York are likely to be flooded, and then we cross-reference that with our databases to actually reach out to those folks, make sure they're okay.
And what company do you work for now? Or sorry,
just myself.
You're a contractor.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And prior to that, I was actually working for a tech company, a data company, Tableau. Portland and Multnomah County both use it pretty extensively. And I was actually working with United Nations as my primary account, so we were helping the United Nations actually create impact with their data. One of the things I found is that you can put in some really cool tools. I think Tableau is a phenomenal tool, not pitching it in any particular way, but the core issue that you really face when looking at tools like this is that it's organizational. It's the people that matter. And the best UN organizations that had good leadership, trusting leadership, were the ones that were able to execute best on their goals.
And what's been your civic involvement?
Yeah, so like I said, I've really tried to be as civically involved as possible. When I was in New York, I spent a lot of time working with nonprofits on their data. That's basically what I was spending all of my extra time doing. In particular, I worked with the West Side Campaign Against Hunger, which is one of the largest food banks out there. And I was helping them with basically trying to provide better services for their constituency. So they collect a lot of information. They do things like SNAP benefits. They even provide legal services, but they didn't have a very good understanding of where the need was in their catchment area, for lack of a better word. So what we actually did was we mapped out where all of their constituency was coming from, and then they actually started mobile food pantries, which are now a pretty prominent feature of many food banks, especially during and after the pandemic, right, is bring the food to the people as opposed to having them come in.
And why are you running? Sorry, we're kind of...
I'm trying. I'll try to. Yeah. So at the core of it, I believe that I believe in a just and thriving Multnomah. Basically, I see a lot of opportunity for change within the county. I see that there are a lot of areas where we could really be improving in the way that we execute on our initiatives. I think that there is a lot of opportunity for integrating our policies at a more holistic level and thinking about, what does it mean to make, again, a thriving Multnomah. So that is a pillar of sustainability and climate resilience. That's a pillar of improving our livability conditions. 1 in 3 households in Multnomah currently are unable to meet their basic needs. And so when we look at, how are we making the region more livable, that's a core tenet of what I want. And then the final pillar is really trying to restore government trust. There's a lot of issues currently with, let's say, disagreements that are happening within and between our regional governments, and that's causing slowed response times. I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve that. One thing I haven't mentioned about my background is I've actually specifically spent time trained and educated in local collaborative decision making, so how regional governments actually come to decisions, how they actually enact policy frameworks. Spend a lot of time studying the urban growth boundary.
Thank you. Sorry, we're going to move on.
Yeah,
Sorry,
absolutely,
we just gotta keep moving.
absolutely.
Sam, can you go ahead?
Yeah, I'm running because I believe that Multnomah County is deeply undemocratic, dysfunctional, and detached from its constituency and the lives that they're leading. Too often, decision-making lacks focus, urgency, good partnershiping, and accountability. I bring to my offer to Multnomah District 2 voters is I have a track record of bringing folks together, taking on big, often controversial, often requiring bureaucratic sort of change, and getting things done with success or improvement. This particular moment, I think, is particularly urgent. I don't think that the electorate believes that they're raising their tax burden, being sold as a way to improve homelessness, that they are seeing the results that they were expecting. And the HRAP, the Homeless Response Action Plan that's coming out, which sets a ambitious, this is an example of what I would do different. The HRAP, which is supposed to deliver some, I think, good, ambitious results within 20 months. If it fails, then likely when the Multnomah services measure starts we're in the sort of election season for its renewal in 2030. If it fails, and Multnomah County does not vote for it in the overwhelming numbers that it did the first time, it will fail. There's a lot riding on this particular moment in the history of Multnomah County, and I'm running to not only help fix Multnomah County, but also with my background in the city and working with other cities, help the cities and the county work better together, especially around the shared issues of human well-being and community safety.
Great, thank you. Shannon?
So Shannon Singleton, I was born in Philadelphia and grew up in Delaware County. My career outside of restaurant world has been in social services. I did my undergrad and graduate degrees both in social work. My first job was at a drug and alcohol-free shelter in Delaware County, and I've since worked with youth who are in a group home outside of foster care setting in California. I also ran a sexual assault and domestic violence crisis response program when I was in Taos, New Mexico. Since coming to Portland in 2007, my first job was resident assistant. I did 12-hour Saturday, Sunday shifts at the Safe Shelter, while also working as a caterer at Lewis & Clark. Gotta have multiple part-time jobs. I have continued my career in social services. I did my graduate degree at Portland State. I've been an adjunct professor at Portland State in the Graduate School of Social Work as well. I have been executive director of Join, which is a local homeless nonprofit doing street outreach. I also was a manager at Cascadia, where I ran the Royal Palm, the clinical services at Bud Clark Commons, as well as the first mental health street outreach team. Then went on to work for Governor Kate Brown for about 3 years, initially as her housing policy advisor, then later as her director of equity and racial justice. After leaving there, I did an 8-month stint as the interim director at the Joint Office of Homeless Services, and since then I have been in the private market, working at a public affairs firm, I think one of the largest Black-owned public affairs firm in the region.
What's the firm?
Espousal Strategies.
Sorry, go ahead.
Government committees and things that I've sat on. I've been on what used to be called the Coordinating Committee to End Homelessness, think pre-Home for Everyone. It was kind of that first iteration. That was a committee that I sat on, as well as the Home for Everyone coordinating board. Both as staff, I was at the Portland Housing Bureau initially when that was started, and developed the first safety off the streets plan when I was there. And additionally, I sat on the Portland Housing Advisory Commission, the oversight kind of budget advisory for the Portland Housing Bureau. Really is the representative who is connected to homeless services for them. Why I'm running now is because I know where the gaps are in our system, and I continue to see them not be filled despite requests by providers, including myself, to look at those gaps in the mental health system. As I said, I started the first street outreach program for our mental health street outreach program. We had 6 staff. There's still only 6 staff. They're supposed to cover the whole county.
That's at Cascadia.
Mm-hmm. And then additionally, when I think about our criminal justice system and the county functioning with the jails, the fact that folks come out of jail back to homelessness is something that I think we can really plug a hole pretty quickly, especially with the internal ability to collaborate across the county.
Great, thank you. Shannon, I want to stick with you for a second on the joint office, because you had a look that very few people have into that office. I think a lot of people think that office is very dysfunctional, sort of a black box. No one really knows what goes on there. Can you just give us is there something, what's wrong with the joint office? 2, what do people misunderstand about the joint office?
Yeah, I think, to be really clear, I worked at the Portland Housing Bureau before the joint office existed, and that system didn't work either. So really moving towards this joint office model has really made a lot of sense to combine resources. I was the project or the contract manager who watched us shuffle money between the city and county, and it didn't really make a lot of sense the way we were functioning in the prior iteration. With the joint office now, I think one of the challenges, and I would say it's actually bigger than just the joint office, I see this across the county, is getting the money out the door. I know with our domestic violence service providers, as well as folks who are connected with the DHS, they also have challenges with getting money out of the county.
Where's it getting stuck? I mean, where is this money getting stuck in the joint office?
So a couple of things are, one, before I had been at the joint office, there was actually no NOFA calendar or plan around how money would go out the door. So I created the first plan that we actually had dates when we knew how much money would go out and when. It was initially being budgeted as if everything would operate for the whole year, which we know isn't true. You just can't move money that way. Some of it too is being for sometimes these special projects, whereas I would advocate for moving it out through our existing providers. When I was at Join last, we ran out of rent assistance in January when the contract ends in June. There's no reason we shouldn't be moving more rent assistance to those types of providers.
And why haven't we been?
A lot of it has been either starting new programs or money earmarked for new programs. And that's one of the things I would say that has been pretty frustrating for me not being at the joint office. When I was there for those 8 months, we purchased multiple properties that are still closed. They were meant to be shelters like Cook Plaza, like the Montevilla site for car camping, and they're still closed. And so money would be earmarked for things like that, and yet they weren't opened.
Why not?
I purchased the properties when I was there, but that was 8 months, and so I'm not sure why they weren't up and running. At this point, that was all after I was gone.
So you don't know where that money's stuck there?
Correct.
That seems to be the big mystery.
Real quick, can we, and thank you for elaborating on that, can we just get a quick letter grade for the joint office? And Shannon, we'll start with you. Performance of the joint office, what letter grade would you give it?
Yeah, I would give it a C.
Okay, Sam?
F.
Okay.
I think C is pretty accurate.
Okay, Jesse?
I would give it a D.
D. Okay. Sam and Jesse, I guess this is a question for both of you, because I understand what's the PBA affiliated group that endorsed both of you? United for Portland for All. They're all very similar sounding.
Yes.
Okay.
There's too many groups.
Yeah, something with Portland in it. Yeah.
Everyone's
For
united
something.
for Portland.
Yeah. So they endorsed.
No one ever gets excited about my group called Portland Meh.
They endorse both of you. And on the surface, it would seem like you guys share a lot of policy views. Jesse, can you tell us why you would be the better choice than someone who's been in politics for decades? Why are you the better choice than Sam?
I feel like it's time for a new generation to lead. No disrespect to my long relationship with Sam, but I think that if we want something we've never had, we have to do something we've never done. And that there have been multiple opportunities. I come from a different world. I'm coming from an outsider's perspective that doesn't have the guarantee or luxury of tax revenue that you have to deliver. Everyone has a customer, even the government. And we are not delivering product to that customer. We're not delivering services to that customer. And there is seemingly no urgency. And I feel confident that my experience in building and managing healthy teams is a unique skill set. It's not one that is common in the public sector, but the ability to motivate teams and work collaboratively with teams is my current profession. And to deliver unique and innovative solutions to complex problems is what I do for a living.
So can you name like an innovative solution that you are eyeballing for a county problem?
Sure. 4 years ago, I started asking for a central database of available shelter beds. And the initial reason was, we talk about Martin versus Boise all the time and how we can't do things because we're not in compliance. And I said, well, how would we ever know? We don't keep track of anything. Can we get a central database? And they said, I can help you. It's hotel software. Every shelter should be using some software like hotel software, and the central database is an API that feeds into like a booking.com. And it should be front-facing. It cannot just be internally facing because no one trusts the county anymore.
So you believe that idea was generated from you?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but everyone's asking about it now.
I'd like to just interject. The county auditor today actually released a report about their tracking management system. They have two systems, HMIS, and then the second one tends to be what their contractors use for making and managing their clientele. Effectively, we do have these database systems in place. The auditor's specific findings were that we have too many of them. I don't see really how having another one is going to solve the problem. What I've experienced as a data expert working with organizations like this for years and years is that the first thing somebody wants is a new system to replace the old one because the old one's not working. And I've got to tell you over and over and over again, and I've worked so hard on this, is it's not the system. Like, definitely there's probably great improvements that we can make on the system. It's the people. It's the training they get. It's the trust they get to complete their jobs. It's the way that we make sure that the data that they are recording actually matches with their job duties. And the auditor specifically called that out in the report that they released today, is that it is a matter of training, it is a matter of alignment with goals, it is not a matter of a database.
Sam, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Jesse. Again, you guys align on a lot of things. It would seem you've worked together for a long time now. Why you instead of Jesse?
Great esteem. Jesse's a friend. I think what I offer that's different is I would be, if elected, I would also be a county outsider, but someone that has a trained eye and mind on how to analyze and move big bureaucracies. And these are big bureaucracies. And in the case of Multnomah County, I think it's fair to say this one is a particular wily bureaucracy because it has been so insular, it has lacked so much transparency, and for a variety of reasons, it hasn't gotten the scrutiny that it deserves. So an example in this race, look at how I sort of run this race. I've been offering concrete approaches and solutions in the context of a political race to make changes. One of them that I think is core is the fact that after I'd heard that, somebody pointed me to watch Sharon Myron's efforts to get the ambulance contract onto the board agenda. The ambulance contract issue you've all been writing about, I think, over 2 years. And immediately I'm like, I knew that wasn't legal. You can't have somebody, even in that form of government, just say, no, never. You just can't. I wrote a email blast about it. The Oregonian decided to truth tell me and came out with it is exactly true.
So how would you cut through that? I mean, can you give us maybe an example of when
On
this was
top of
your
that-
last stint at the city?
On top
Can you
of
give
that-
us an example of a way that you moved bureaucracy on a really difficult issue?
Yeah, so Street Services Coordination Team, when I came to the city, our offer to folks experiencing houselessness that we came in contact with our EMTs and police, or that we had to move, was to give them this little purple book. You might have seen it, that showed all the ways that homeless people could find services, if they had a cell phone, if they had a way of getting there, everything else. Working with Sarah Fee Allen on my team, who had long championed this idea, we put together the Street Services Coordination Center at the time that we started making sweeps with the emergency declaration. So instead of just giving you the little purple book to say, we're going to sweep your stuff, good luck. If you got a phone, here's something you can do. We expanded our ability to store people's goods. We got from the county a daily inventory on shelter beds that were available, or shelter slots that were available, and where they were. Then we also put our own money in to start giving people rides to, when we were picking them up, we would help them pick up their belongings. We would give them a ride to the place that they could store their belongings for free, and then we would give them a ride to the shelter where they could check in after they decided which shelter option they were going to use. The county, when we first published why I'm running, when we first published how we needed the county's help on this, they freaked out that they were even on the organizational chart. And that was just many of my lived experience with the county during those 2 years back at City Hall. And it just showed me just how dysfunctional the county was. They're so allergic to wanting to have anything to do with street management that their own system is like in a parallel universe from reality when it comes to helping people get off the street.
Quick question. So, over the past, how long have you been gone from City Hall now? A little over a year? So a lot's happened in the past year. A lot of it, especially in regards to homelessness, we've put up these, this task site. We've got the Street Service Coordination Center. How much of what the city is doing right now to tackle homelessness do you believe was your idea?
Well, I put together a fantastic team. So it was my team and I and a lot of other people working together. And I keep in touch with them, and I'm very proud of the work that they continue. But that first task site, finding that first location, that was my job to do. We did it. It took longer to get the site open than we want, but it's been open 8 months. And last week, the Southeast Examiner, after it being open 8 months, remember this is the hyper-local newspaper that is likely to be critical of anything like this, and we're really worried about it going into that triangle. They called it a success. And in those first 8 months, it placed 100 people in permanent supportive housing. And I can go into all I think you're familiar with what the overall strategy is, but that's an example of getting stuff done. Initially, as you know, it was over the dead body of the county, thanks to Julie Brim Edwards and the chair changing her mind and others on the board. They're now helping to pay for it.
Shannon, I want to go back to the joint office really briefly. Are we holding our nonprofit contractors responsible for how they're spending SHS dollars?
I think there's a couple of things that could look different with how we contract. One, I think I've seen once that a contract was ever pulled by the person not meeting outcomes. I think we actually have to be willing to have those hard conversations, and if providers can't improve, then we have to be willing to shift those funds.
Do you think more contracts should have been pulled than only one, in your experience, over 8 months in the joint office?
Some of that comes from my experience at the City of Portland, the Housing Bureau, and some contractors that's actually when the contract was pulled, was when it was a City of Portland contract. And this was, I think the other pieces of it are that We don't really do a lot with the reports, right? We talked about data earlier, and yes, the outcomes, the numbers are important, but often the narrative is missed. I think in the city's audit, they talked about how length of stay is not a great measure for our shelters. And yet we put this length of stay restriction on people, but also providers are not going to kick folks out because they're there too long. It doesn't make sense to put somebody back on the street just because they've been there for 30 or 60 days. So I think we have to reevaluate what we're actually measuring and give contractors the ability to meet those goals and support them to do so. But if they're not able to, then we need to have those tougher conversations.
What are we not asking from our nonprofit providers about like what their outcomes are that you believe we should be asked, or the joint office should be asking for?
Yeah, so I think it's really looking at the aggregate. So one of the things that's also a problem is our providers don't get to see the aggregate of all the different data. So all the shelter providers aren't understanding what it looks like for outcomes for all the different shelters. We used to have a system where we would meet as different disciplines and have conversations that included what data looked like across the whole system, what kind of hotspots there might be when we had our outreach and engagement work group. This is all the frontline workers coming together to understand what's really going on. And during COVID, understandably, those meetings stopped happening because it was crisis mode, but those should have been restarted. And that was something I had put in place when I was at the joint office, and I'm not sure why that wasn't followed through, because the providers today are still asking for that. So I think, yes, there's the accountability, but we actually have to give them information to understand what's working, because sometimes what's working well at another shelter can be replicated, but if they don't know that, how are they supposed to replicate it?
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, what's not working about the joint office? I mean, what is not, like, we're not deploying dollars fast enough. There's questions about the efficacy of how those dollars are being spent. I mean, what's your like diagnosis of, is it a lack of leadership? Is it a failure of our systems? I mean, like, what's wrong if you could diagnose it?
Yeah, I mean, reality is lack of affordable housing is going to continue to be an issue for any system that's trying to get folks out of homelessness, right? We house thousands of people, thousands of households every year. What we don't do is prevent more from becoming homeless, and what we don't do is decrease barriers so folks can get inside.
But we have, I mean, the county's poured bajillions of dollars into rent assistance. I mean, what?
Can I?
Just real quick,
It's not necessarily all rent assistance, right? It's the lack of the affordability for folks. So when we build a building, we might get a couple of units that are 0 to 30, and that's actually who's sleeping outside. Most of those apartments are actually for folks in the working class, and they absolutely deserve housing. But the idea that we're building for the folks who are actually our lowest income and most vulnerable is not true.
Sure.
And that's something that we actually have.
But the county doesn't build. I mean, the county doesn't build things, right? They don't build affordable housing.
Right,
so if we
like
could
I
talk
said,
about just what the joint office is responsible
So what
for.
I was saying, what I mentioned earlier is that land banking and that piece of that opportunity where it actually was intentionally done, that this would be a shelter now, but actually provided a development opportunity in the long term. So that's some of the things that the county could do.
So the county needs to buy more.
I think the county could do, and I know Metro is holding those conversations now, so it may be that that's something that shifts to Metro with the surplus of SHS.
Do you have a view
that
on-
ability of
do you have a
purchasing.
view on whether that should happen? Should Metro go to the ballot and take back $100 million or whatever amount per year?
I really support the Metro conversation.
Really?
I don't want it to just be about development, though. I think land banking has to be a part of that conversation.
So you'd be willing to take money away from the counties and send it back to Metro?
Yes.
Can we go down the line real quick, just yes or no on that? Sam, are you supportive of that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm supportive, just generally speaking. Would want to have more discussion about what that would look like, but yeah.
Sure. Jesse?
Yes, I think I need to study it more, but
You're all a yes on the Metro, going back to the ballot.
That's so interesting. Everybody in District 4 was a no.
Yeah, yeah.
Shannon, just one second. Shannon, I want to come back to you for a second because clearly the other three people on your side of the table are trying to run as outsiders. You're a bit of both. You've been on the inside at Join, at JOHS, at PHB. No offense, you're a social worker. I love social workers.
Mm-hmm.
However, oftentimes social workers are not necessarily the people who are going to hold the strings of accountability or are going to hold people accountable. At least that's a perception that some people might have. So can you make a case for why somebody who's sort of been part of the system, why would you be effective at changing it? Wouldn't you be a captive to all your friends who are and former colleagues who are still part of that system?
Absolutely not. I think one of the things you forgot, Nigel, is I'm also from Philly. So holding people accountable and having those tough conversations is something that's second nature for me. I think I also have had the track record of working across with people who I don't agree with to really find a compromise and negotiate to get those things done. So I don't have, and frankly, just for folks to know, social workers, like your job is literally setting boundaries all day with people. So it's a lot about accountability.
So give us an example of when you have held somebody accountable and when you have made a positive change by
Sure.
having that tough conversation.
Sure. Well, I ran the Safe Shelter for a while, and that was a good example where a low barrier shelter doesn't mean you can behave however you want and assault other people or do anything that you want in that space. So as a low barrier shelter, we had a lot of folks in there, and there were times that I had people who physically assaulted another person. I had one woman in particular do that multiple times, and every time I exited her from the program. The difference was she would be exited, but she could always come back, and we would try it again. And so that's the accountability, is you hold the boundary, but you also open space and hope for a second chance or a third chance. And in this woman's case, it was a 12th chance when she said to me, I finally appreciate why you kept doing that, and was actually able to be in the program, be settled, be safe, and move into housing. So I think that's an example of that personal accountability that I'm willing to do. And I think I've shown in my work in the leadership roles that I'm also willing to hold the county accountable. As much as it might be working as a nonprofit provider, part of my role as executive director was also to push the county and to push them to look at things a little bit differently. It was why we started the landlord recruitment program. I was also able to push and really get us to look at what permanent supportive housing looks like a little differently. I started a mobile permanent supportive housing team that has a 98% success rate of retention for their clients. There's no reason we shouldn't be replicating these types of models, but we're not.
Can I have each of you real quick grade JVP's performance as chair over the past year and 4 months, Shannon?
I feel like it's incomplete right now.
If you had to grade her right now, how would you grade her?
I would give her an incomplete.
What is that? I mean, what is that?
Oh, I've done that. I mean, as an instructor, you give people an incomplete when they don't finish the
So
work.
like, is that, can you give a letter grade?
I think I would probably give her a C.
Okay. Sam?
D.
Okay. Nick?
I don't like this because here, can I just really quickly
No,
here?
you don't have to like it. Just
Yeah.
please give us a letter grade. We're running out of time.
All right. B minus.
B minus, okay?
D.
D, okay. Sam, I want to ask you about your last departure from City Hall. I know that you and the mayor disagree about what exactly happened, but there were allegations that, you had mistreated women, bullied women. Have you learned, what have you learned from that departure?
Yeah, I'm not a perfect person. I make mistakes. I grow as time has passed. So there's that, full stop. And I believe in the process that I helped set up over the years, that when there are complaints, they should be investigated. The fact that, so the complainant in this case didn't ask for investigation, didn't ask for me to be fired. The mayor's office had the opportunity to ask for investigations. They didn't, and they released uninvestigated complaints.
Do you think you did mistreat those women in any way?
Those are conversations that went on over months. There were 2 complainants. There were 3. One was resolved. The other 2 were over hot button issues. And in terms of, I respect their point of view, and I certainly don't get up in the morning trying to make people mad, but at a certain point, my job is to move things along. So I would have preferred that they had been investigated before they were released.
So when you were a city commissioner and when you were mayor, or when you worked in the mayor's office, you had bureaus, you had direct ability to go into a bureau and say, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you need to fix it. County commissioners, as we know and as we've read, have very limited authority over the various departments that make up that vast county bureaucracy. So why would we think that you could move that bureaucracy when you really don't have any line responsibility? Any of the four of you have any line responsibility to the departments, including JOHS, but all the other county departments that do very important work and often sometimes don't do it very well.
And it's even worse than that now, because there was the rule that the board put in place that any member of the board could put a resolution or a draft ordinance on the commission board's agenda and it would be discussed. And that was corrupted over the years, multiple years, and now only the chair gets to decide what goes on the agenda.
Right.
So I think the first thing is get rid of that. That can be done in 3 ways. One of them is a vote of 3 to overturn the administrative rule. Someone can sue, and then you can go directly to the voters. But that's a huge issue. And then I would also have lobbyists for the first time in the county start being registered and report, which unlike every other big counties.
That's a good idea, but it doesn't.
That allows everyone. So I want to give not just myself, but everyone on the board their full authority to do their job of setting policy, as the charter says, and also setting the budget, and to oversee the execution of both policies and the budget as required by the charter. So the same way, so those are steps. Then once there, the county hasn't had a very, in terms of government hygiene, the county hasn't had a very hygienic way of passing policy so that we all can determine whether or not it's working. But obviously sticking with homelessness, which I think is a key issue. You work to gather community support, you work to get 2 other votes, and you just keep working until you do. And one of the first things that I would go for is changes to the joint office, which right now is absolutely fatally flawed from the beginning. It doesn't have adequate internal matrix power to do the coordinating with county government, much less between the 3 big players, at least 3 big players, Home Forward, the county, and the city. They're about to replicate with this new plan that they've come up with, the fatal flaw in the joint office with advisory groups. My proposal, take that $650 million from Home Forward, the county, the city, for both affordable housing, houselessness, and behavioral health, and we give ourselves 90 days to put together a joint plan looking at that money for rebudgeting what isn't as important because it's been done over the years in sort of episodic silo basis, and come up with a joint plan that actually has the investments on the continuum at the right place. It means the county has to give up control, so does the city to a degree, and so does Home Forward. We have to do better with the $650 million.
So the fatal flaw is there's a lack of coordination, just to be clear.
No, the fatal flaw is a group. We need to act and put ourselves together, design a process that recognizes the complex humanitarian disaster that this is.
But what's the fatal flaw?
Fatal flaw is the joint office isn't empowered, it isn't joint, and it isn't empowered, and it isn't connected to the money.
Okay, all right. You're an outsider, you haven't worked in government, so the county has 6,000 or 7,000 people who they were there before you're going to get there, they'll be there after you're gone, so how are you going to make a dent in that?
Yeah, someone asked me that before too, and I tell people that someone said, how are you going to get them to do what you want? And I said, I don't know that it's what I want. I really believe that people want to do a good job at their job, and what I would ask is what they think the answer is too. I've had so many people from the county ask to meet with me at the hotel just to advocate for them. I've had social workers come to the hotel and say, we need a definition for gravely disabled. At the state, it wasn't even at the county. And I said, how does that change things? They said the definition of imminent threat to oneself is an issue, but if we could maybe get gravely disabled, which I said, what state has it? And they didn't know, and I said, I know, it's Massachusetts. Massachusetts is always in the top 5 with mental health. So I think even, for example, in the jails, I met with one of the deputies there, and they said, we used to have a really successful dorm block that was rehab ready, and they stopped funding it. So people would be arrested for something else, but they were addicted, and they would be put in the specific dorm block that people could go through rehab in the jails. And she said it was really successful, and they stopped funding it because it wasn't sexy enough, I guess. But I think that the first thing that anyone wants is to be asked, what have you seen that's been successful? And then they need someone to advocate for them. And I mean, I see this with my own teams. I don't presume to know what people with different jobs than I do, what they see the answer to be. So I say, what do you see every day? And then let's figure out the best way to policy-wise fix this. And I see some breakdowns in policy in general where we're not thinking through every possible way someone might game something. Right? I said this to some state representatives where I was like, everyone's job that writes policy is to think through every way it could go wrong and who has to enforce it, and is it even enforceable? And if you don't do that, you have failed at your job. That's what I have to do every day. And the question had come up about Measure 110. And I said, so what is this like public use and public high? How is that allowed? And they said, I was speaking to Representative Dexter, and she said, well, illicit drugs were always illegal. So when you legalize possession, we didn't have any rules for public use and public high. And I was like, well, couldn't you anticipate that that would be an issue? And I said, that's your job. And then also, who has to enforce this? And is it enforceable? And so I see that that is how I would approach all of the thousands of people that work there, and where I'm sure they are also seeing breakdowns and have a great deal of frustration.
Can we ask Nick the same question?
Yeah?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I've gotten all the way back, yeah.
And you're an outsider, you're coming into this,
Yeah.
from New York, from the old country.
From the old town, yeah.
So just same question. What do you see that you would want to tackle first, and what do you think you can do from your position?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I would look at this, the way I would look at, how do you approach this, is it's fundamentally it's a job, and you would be in a position of management setting policy, just really laying the groundwork here for everyone, right? And for me, the first thing that I do whenever I get into a new situation that I'm unaware of any of the details is pretty much follow what Jesse was saying in a lot of ways. I want to talk to two people, basically. The first one is the directors and heads of the departments, and then the second is somebody who's a frontline worker, somebody who's down on the ground doing the work, so that I can understand, is there a disconnect between the way that our directors are portraying things and the way that our frontline workers are experiencing things. And there's actually a really great example where we can see this actually in JOHS right now, where JOHS has identified about 6 pages of data gaps, things that they don't collect, don't know about the population of people that they're serving that they think would be critical to helping them. And then when you get to frontline workers, they say, yeah, we know all this stuff, but we don't record it, we don't have any way of reporting it back. And it starts to show in the way that we implement policies based on that. So for me, I really do come from, I think, a very similar sort of cloth in terms of how we want to collaborate. I think the devil is in the detail of how well you actually build those relationships. Going back to that question just briefly of how do you grade JVP in her time, I don't know. And so I'm deeply uncomfortable with passing judgment on somebody without having a good sense of what that full story is with her.
You could watch the meetings though.
Yeah, I do.
Write down some of that?
I do, but the thing is that I don't understand her internal logic a lot of the times, and this isn't. It's just I don't want to be mean to people. If I think that we need to be more accountable about things, we can absolutely talk about that and the ways that we can enact that, how we can make change. Yeah. But I'm not going to make friends or make people who are going to help me make decisions and help us run the county together, which is ultimately what the commission, which has so little power, as Sam has rightfully pointed out, we're not going to be able to build that collaborative, collective power if we're constantly at each other's throats.
Yeah.
So it's really, really important to me that as I build relationships, I am trying to take in the whole person and how their experiences have led them to where we are now. It doesn't mean that, again, as Shannon said, we don't hold them accountable, but it means that we spend a lot of time figuring out how do we do better.
Yeah. I think Portlanders are impatient, more impatient now for results than I think we've ever seen them.
I think that's pretty fair.
And I think that argues for having a plan on day one. I think Joe Biden said something like that.
Well, I think if I could...
What did day one look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, one, those thousands of employees endorsed me in this race, so I think that's important to note too. But I am collaborative, and I've done that, and I've been able to show that, and I think people do want somebody who has done frontline work and actually knows what policies and how they impact people on the ground. Day one for me is really looking at filling those gaps. The mental health outreach that I mentioned, that is a huge gap in our system. It takes too long to get somebody eligible for Medicaid and connected to an outpatient program for that to be how we're addressing that crisis on the street.
So how do you get, what's the first step?
Yeah, the first step is
happening?
identifying dollars to do that, and if there's dollars there to do any kind of outreach, I would ask for it to go to mental health outreach. I would look to Cascadia and see if they're able and willing to expand their team. If not, there's been some good conversations with LifeWorks. They've been getting more involved. I think that NEA is another really great partner who can do some outreach, whether that's mental health and or addictions, but also has the facilities to then get people into that transitional recovery housing. So that's really one of my big first steps, is how do we get that more robust, so that even if people are swept and moved into a shelter, they still don't have that mental health or addiction service. And the staff need to be able to follow the person and not be stuck with, I can only provide services because I'm a part of this program. And so I like the outreach model because it frees staff up to be much more flexible.
Day one?
I would ask the county to, my colleagues on the county to embrace two big goals that will require refinement, which is then consulting with constituencies. One is that we get back to the public safety levels pre-pandemic, community safety levels pre-pandemic. And the second is that we get to functional zero in terms of homelessness, and we set a goal to do that in 4 years, again with an eye to the renewal of the Metro ballot measure, because if we don't do this...
Isn't that that's built for zero, right? I mean, is that
functional zero
Yeah.
is a version of Built for Zero.
Yeah.
But I think the county lacks...
Are we trying to do that already?
We did it with veterans, and now they're trying to do it. Yes.
I want
Is
the
that,
whole-
is that happening?
Yes.
That is not everything I know. Those two things are not the goals of the county. Those are definable, those are auditable. There's a lot of implementation that comes from them. It empowers the 5,600, I think it's 5,600 employees of the county to know what the two above the baseline services, what the two big changes are required. And then I would also make the moves to free up the board to do its job around these undemocratic things that hold back the entire board's ability to provide the policy and budgetary oversight.
What do you mean community safety levels? You talking about crime rates?
Crime rates, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Pre-pandemic. And those are tangible. You know what they are. You ask, and then you've got to come up with how you're going to make that happen.
Yeah, what can the county do there? 'Cause
The county, on the homelessness side, I say every week you give folks 90 days to come up with a plan, a 4-year plan, building on what's there to fill out the continuum for homelessness, create a plan to meet that goal of getting to functional zero within 4 years. And that those three organizations, the county, city, and Home Forward, with the $650 million, they make the investments and reinvestments, this is around the continuum, to make that happen and empower them to do that. And Home Forward can't do any of that. And we are not we have not put ourselves together on this issue to deal with it at the depth and at the scope and at the agility that it requires. And on the similar thing on the public safety side, which even has more money than the $650 million. LIPSIC, Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, the people that are making the decisions on both every day, where the money goes, are they going to continue this or that, what the plan is for the year, they need to be the ones at the table. Taking outsiders that have nothing to do with spending money and oversight of the actual functions in these three organizations has shown to be a fatal flaw in the joint office. We need to change that. And we need to, especially on the drug crisis. So that kind of focus and agility, that kind of, and then accountability report cards that come out to every household in the city, every address in the city for the joint results, the joint outcomes. Right now you will see a news release about this great big success. It's a tiny little thing. Right now both of these shared responsibilities are being budgeted and run on a patchwork basis, and as a result they're inherently unaccountable.
It's
Both need to be
terrifying that this is not the goal. You're saying it's not the goal of the county, this is not where the wood's not behind that arrowhead.
There isn't a goal to get to functional zero that I have seen that has been adopted by the county Board of Commissioners. There isn't a goal of the cities of the county to get back to pre-pandemic public safety levels. And the four.
I can tell you it is.
Sorry, I'm moving.
We need to move this along a little bit.
Yeah, as Shannon said, there is a goal to get to functional zero.
Day one for you.
Yeah, day one for me. So I see a core problem, which is we have a housing first policy here to get people into homes. In order to do that, we need housing first. Do you know how many units we're going to build in the next 5 years? About 5,800. That's affordable housing units. Do you know how many we need in the next 5 years? About 81,000. We are not in a position currently to actually get to zero. We are not in a position to functionally reduce any of the livability issues that we've got currently in the county, and at the city level. But that's sort of the collaborative problem that we have ultimately. And so this is why what I see is that we've got to really, really slow down for a hot second, think about how are we going to get all of those units. We need them yesterday. So I see two things. First, we need to look at all of the housing options that might be available. So Home Forward, for example, is allowed to have up to 1,700 public housing units. So they could purchase those units tomorrow, make them public housing units. We don't have to wait for Section 9 vouchers. We don't have to do anything. Home Forward can just put people in homes. There are only 200 units that they currently own that fit that criteria of public housing. So we could get, like I said, about 1,400 more units tomorrow from them. We need to start looking at what the extra housing supply is in the region. The census currently estimates there are 50,000 additional housing units than there are households that actually live in the Portland metro area. Where are they? Why don't we know what they are? The Multnomah County has an incredible power in its tax authority in terms of auditing the properties that are in its jurisdiction, in terms of knowing what the usage is, and in terms of knowing what the state and condition of them are. We have the money through taxes like our supportive housing services bonds, where we've already raised way more than we can spend. Last year we only spent 60-some-odd% of our supportive housing services bond, and that left 40% of it on the table in order for us to quickly implement it. So we have options for places where we can be going as the county with mechanisms that are already available, already funded, to start finding housing units tomorrow. That would be really where I would like to go first. I've got a lot of other goals, but let's talk about this crisis and focus on that first. Second thing I'd like to really, really focus on.
Day one, you only get one.
I know. Okay, we'll just leave it.
All right, day one. Day two, we'll get to day two.
So day one, I would like to schedule a meeting with a first group of frontline workers to hear where they're seeing breakdown points. and what their suggestions are. I'd also like to have a group of our contractors in a similar field. So for example, any shelter contractors or shelter contracts that we're working with, for each you need to establish a common vision and systems for sharing information. The last is with a vote of 3, you can have a special meeting. You can call a special meeting outside of the regular board meetings, and you just have to codify whatever you decide in that meeting at the standing meeting. With a vote of 3, I would like to call a special meeting that I do believe we would have 3, and change the AMR contract terms and begin the process of
To
the central
one-
database. Yes,
And 1 EMT.
correct.
Okay, last question is our fun question. So if there was a movie made about your life, what actor or actress would play you?
For their characteristics or what they look like?
It's totally your choice.
It's up to you how you want to interpret
A
it.
movie, the actor or
And
actress.
whoever thinks of it first, go for it. We don't have
I'm
to
gonna
in
go
order.
with Tracy Ellis Ross because people say that she looks like me.
Good.
Let's see. All right.
I can't remember her name, but she's in Northern Exposure. It's Maggie.
Oh, yeah.
Maggie-
I know
Maggie
it looked like
Gyllenhaal?
Maggie.
Turner?
No.
Janine Turner.
Janine
Is that
yeah.
Janine Turner?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Nick?
I mean, is it going to be anybody other than Keanu Reeves?
All right.
It is
Sam?
not.
Such a good answer.
Robert Downey?
All right.
Good one.
He's got as much age spots as I do now, so it seems right.
Great. Well, thank you all.
Thank you very
Really
much.
appreciate
So
you coming.
photographs,
Oh, yeah.
if you